a lavish ballroom dripping with crystal chandeliers and endless vanity. The prideful bride suddenly grabbed the lapel of a quiet man by the champagne bar. "You think this cheap suit makes you worthy to stand here?" She mocked him before 300 guests, then gave a cruel yank. The fabric ripped wide open right across his chest. The whole room fell dead silent. He simply looked down at the torn seam, brushed his sleeve, and met the groom's eyes with a look of cold disappointment. Nobody realized this quiet man held the groom's entire future in his hands. The massive St. Adrian estate overlooked the Hudson, a cold monument of imported marble. Every window glowed gold in the October dusk. 300 guests had arrived. Black ties, custom gowns, and powerful family names straight from the financial pages. The bride's family had built half of upstate New York over 4 proud generations. And tonight the new son-in-law was poised to inherit a slice of that legacy. Nathaniel Reed showed up alone, wearing a simple dark charcoal suit. He drove himself, parking his own modest car. He walked through the entrance quietly, demanding no attention and needing no introduction. The valet sneered at his car, looked him up and down, and asked if he had a delivery. Nathaniel quietly presented his invitation. The valet froze, sputtered a quick apology, and waved him in without making eye contact. He had spent 4 months in intense negotiations with Archer Dynamics. The numbers were absolutely brutal. The construction firm was 3/4 away from total collapse, drowning in massive debt that no traditional lender would ever touch. Graham Whitmore had begged Blackstone Crest Capital for a financial miracle, and Nathaniel was the only investor willing to risk $1.4 billion, enough to save the company and keep 2,000 people employed across 6 states. His senior partners, lawyers, and deal team had handled the actual negotiations. He always preferred it that way. For the last 15 years, he deliberately avoided rooms where his name carried power, knowing that true respect is earned. He learned far more by being underestimated than by being praised. Graham had never seen his face, only hearing his voice on speakerphone. He was just a signature on a contract, a powerful blank space behind the Capitol. The lavish wedding invitation had been hand-delivered to his Manhattan office last month. Graham wanted early goodwill before the closing. He wanted his savior to witness his proud family, this milestone, and his success. Nathaniel accepted the invitation for one crucial reason. He needed to observe Graham outside of business hours. He knew how easily a man could fake integrity across a polished boardroom table, revealing their true arrogant nature when they think nobody is watching. So he walked silently through the marble foyer, quietly watching everything. The grand chandeliers, the expensive orchids, and a rented quartet playing way too loud. He noticed a wealthy woman in emerald green, screaming at a young coat-check girl over a misplaced fur coat. He saw 2 wealthy men in their 60s, mocking an old colleague who had lost everything. He watched as the room sorted itself by surname and bank balance. We can already tell he had seen quite enough. Inside that ballroom, no one deigned to treat him as an equal. 2 waiters offered him champagne, then snidely asked if he belonged in the kitchen. A woman draped in pearls touched his sleeve, asking in a polite yet highly patronizing voice if he was Mr. Whitmore's driver. Nathaniel simply shook his head and walked right past her toward the champagne bar, finding a quiet corner where he could watch their entire evening of vanity unfold. Vanessa Whitmore spotted him within 10 minutes. The arrogant bride was trained to read the social layout of a room like others read the weather. And an uninvited stranger in her VIP section was a detail she refused to ignore. A man she did not recognize. A man whose well-cut suit carried no expensive logo she could recognize from afar. No luxury watch to evaluate, no woman on his arm. She crossed to her mother, Margaret, who was holding court by the dessert table. Margaret followed her daughter's gaze, frowned deeply, and shook her head. Neither of them recognized him. Neither could place him on the exclusive social map they had memorized down to its tiniest detail. To Vanessa, that meant only one thing. Her deep arrogance assumed some careless mistake had led a lesser person into her wedding. She drifted past Nathaniel twice over the next half hour, moving closer and laughing louder each time. Her performative laugh, aimed at nothing, was fully meant to sting. Her judgmental glance, landing on his plain collar, worn shoes, and missing cufflinks, was meant to humiliate him. Nathaniel calmly sipped his water and said nothing. He had been judged by arrogant people like her since before he was 30. He had long ago stopped reacting to such pettiness. Graham appeared briefly at his side, displaying a polite, warm smile, gripping his shoulder just a bit too hard. "Glad you came. Really glad. We'll talk before dinner." "Yeah, she gets nervous at these things." And then, he vanished. Swallowed by the crowd, he left Nathaniel with a grim realization. The groom saw his wife's pride, yet chose to let her ruin her own future. The string quartet began playing a faster tempo. Vanessa marched back to him with a glass of champagne in hand, accompanied by 3 of her bridesmaids trailing closely behind. Her fake smile had hardened into something performative. The space around the bar emptied, the way a room clears when it senses a hostile scene brewing, and all nearby conversations quickly dropped to a quiet whisper. Stopping 2 feet away, she tilted her head. "I'm sorry," she announced, loud enough for all the nearby tables to hear. "But I don't think I know you, and I know everyone my husband knows." Her eyes scanned him as if inspecting a nasty stain on a tablecloth. "Who exactly invited you?" Nathaniel met her gaze and answered plainly. "Your husband did." A wave of smug giggles rippled through her bridesmaids. Vanessa let the mockery settle before leaning in closer. Closer. Funny. Because Graham doesn't have friends who dress like this. She flicked his lapel, her condescending touch throwing away any chance of respect. "Where did you even get this suit? Is it rented? Did you just wander in from the parking lot for free food?" He stayed silent. A dignified man has nothing to prove. The chatter around them died down to absolute silence. Everyone watched, eager for the cheap entertainment of seeing an arrogant host humiliate a guest. Several younger guests immediately pulled out their phones to record. What happened next occurred so fast that nobody could agree if she meant to be that cruel. Her hand gripped the lapel of his jacket. She tugged. The hand-stitched seam of his bespoke Savile Row jacket parted like paper, a priceless bridge burned in a second. The fabric fell apart. Champagne spilled from her tilted glass, splashing onto the cold marble floor. Silence fell. 300 guests watched, but not a single soul spoke up. Graham rushed through the crowd, a moment too late. He saw the ruined jacket. He saw his wife looking smug and victorious, displaying an ugly side he never knew. He saw Nathaniel standing perfectly still, his hands at his sides. His eyes locked onto the groom, showing no trace of anger. Not shock, but something much worse. It was the quiet look of a man who had just measured their worth. Graham's mouth opened, then closed. He looked at the staring crowd, the recording phones, and his arrogant new wife. When he finally found his voice, his low, panicked plea was meant only for Nathaniel. He sounded like a man desperately trying to put out a blazing fire with his bare hands. "Look, it's our wedding. Emotions are high. Just let it go, please. Do this for me. We can settle everything tomorrow, I promise." Nathaniel quietly held his gaze, then looked down at his ruined, torn lapel. He looked at the bride, whose mocking smile still remained. He looked at the silent onlookers who had not, in the last 60 seconds, uttered a single word in his defense. He quietly set down his glass, brushed off his sleeve, and walked out of the room, leaving their arrogance behind. Nathaniel was already halfway down the marble hallway when he heard footsteps behind him. 2 sets, heavy and deliberate. The luxury estate maintained its own private security guards in dark suits and earpieces. 2 guards had been sent after him by a host, too proud to realize the massive mistake they were making. The larger guard stepped directly in his path near the doors to the east garden. "Sir, we need you to stop." His voice held the cold authority of a man blinded by his employer's foolish pride. "Mrs. Whitmore says you caused a scene inside. We have to check your invitation and search your things before you leave the estate." Nathaniel just stared back, meeting their blind arrogance with silence. He knew exactly what was unfolding. But Vanessa's toxic arrogance wasn't satisfied with merely insulting him inside. She wanted him humiliated, searched, and paraded away like a common criminal. To feed her ego, she wanted a tidy story to tell tomorrow, and her narrative demanded a guilty scapegoat. He could have easily revealed his identity. Just one word, and every arrogant guard on the property would have instantly started begging for forgiveness. But he chose silence. You and I are about to see how far their blind arrogance goes, and he wanted Graham to witness it too. The guards marched him out a side door and across the gravel toward the parking lot, where luxury cars sat gleaming under the bright floodlights. A few wealthy guests had stepped outside to smoke or call their drivers, and they stared, eager to mock the man being escorted. Their phones came out, but Nathaniel kept his head high. We can see he walked with pure dignity, as if heading to his own luxury ride, which he actually was. The shorter guard demanded to see his invite. Nathaniel handed it over. The guard checked the embossed name against the list on his phone, and his arrogant smirk instantly vanished when he realized there was an actual match. He glanced at his partner. The taller guard gave a tiny dismissive headshake. Respect didn't matter here. The arrogant bride had given her strict orders, and Mrs. Whitmore was the pampered daughter of the people who paid them. "We still have to search the briefcase," the taller guard insisted. Nathaniel quietly placed his leather briefcase on the car hood, stepping back with calm, respectful dignity. The guards opened it up. Inside sat a fountain pen and a folded business term sheet, and a single envelope addressed directly to Graham, written in Nathaniel's hand. The shorter guard picked up the sheet and read the header, and all the arrogance drained from his face, leaving him completely pale under the lights. He silently showed the document to his partner. The partner stared in disbelief. Both guards stood there in stunned silence. The top of the page proudly displayed the powerful corporate name of Blackstone Capital, featuring a deal number that ended with $1.4 billion. But the signature line remained blank. It was only waiting for a signature scheduled for Monday morning, leaving both of the guards completely paralyzed. Just then, Graham rushed into the parking lot. His expensive jacket was gone, his sleeves rolled up, and his bow tie hung completely loose. He was panting heavily, as if he had sprinted across the entire estate to stop them. He saw the open briefcase and the massive contract sitting on the hood. He saw Nathaniel standing there in calm silence, completely unbothered by their arrogance. Graham's face filled with dread. He looked from his arrogant guards to the ruined deal. For a fleeting second he realized his mistake. But arrogance won, and he chose blind pride instead. Because showing respect would mean humbling himself to act. And that meant stepping right back inside that grand ballroom to confess his wife just destroyed his empire. His vanity couldn't tolerate that humiliation in front of his peers. Especially not tonight, when they were merging their elite families. "Just let him through," Graham snapped, his voice tense. "It's fine, just a misunderstanding. We'll handle it inside." Too proud to meet Nathaniel's eyes, he offered no apology. He refused to acknowledge the ripped jacket Nathaniel still wore. And he withheld the basic, human respect that could have saved his business in that parking lot. He simply turned, retreating to the safety of his glittering party, leaving Nathaniel stranded outside with the security guards and his open briefcase resting on a stranger's car. Nathaniel quietly snapped the briefcase shut. He saw now that this toxic arrogance ran much deeper than one cruel bride. It was an entire elite system where a husband stood by as his wife publicly humiliated an innocent guest, and chose his own comfortable silence over doing the right thing. The wealthy guests laughed inside, while staff filmed the drama. The groom, whose business survival depended on Nathaniel's signature, had just thrown away his final chance. Nathaniel was heading to his car when her voice cut through the air. Vanessa had strolled out after him, swirling a glass of champagne. She held the train of her wedding gown, while a bridesmaid carefully kept it off the dirty gravel. Hearing the intruder was being thrown out, she came outside to arrogantly savor her petty victory. Her wealthy mother followed close behind her, wearing that condescending smile wealthy mothers use when discarding people they deem beneath them. "Still here," Vanessa shouted mockingly across the lot. Her sneering voice echoed over the elegant music from the ballroom. "I ordered them to kick you out, not show you around. Are you actually expecting some big apology? Because, sweetheart, you're not getting one." Nathaniel slowly turned around. The bright floodlight caught his torn jacket. He remained completely silent. Mistaking his quiet dignity for weakness, she sneered, "What was your plan tonight? Crash our lavish wedding, steal food, and show off to your poor friends? Did you honestly think you'd blend in?" She waved her champagne glass carelessly, splashing expensive drops onto the gravel between them. People like you don't belong in a room like ours. Someone made a massive mistake letting you in, and they will pay. Right then, heavy headlights swung through the main security gate. 3 sleek black luxury SUVs rolled in silently, sweeping the courtyard with bright beams. These were not the typical vehicles of wealthy guests arriving to party. These were the heavy-duty rides sent to retrieve someone incredibly important. They pulled up in a perfect imposing line right beside Nathaniel's old sedan, and the rear door of the lead SUV swung open before the engine even died. Harold Bennett stepped down onto the loose gravel. He was a man of quiet power in a simple coat that didn't need to show off. He had been the chief financial officer for 2 of the biggest holding companies on the East Coast before agreeing to bring his talents to Blackstone Crest. And there were powerful guests standing in that driveway. Elite families whose names filled the financial papers for 40 years, and they recognized him instantly. Margaret Whitmore recognized him first, and her smug smile instantly vanished. She gripped her daughter's arm, but Vanessa was still glaring at Nathaniel, still riding the high of her own petty arrogance, ignorant of her mother's warning until the tight grip became painful. Harold Bennett walked across the loose gravel without any rush. He showed quiet respect, bowing his head slightly as he approached Nathaniel. Then he spoke loudly enough for the entire wedding party to hear. "Mr. Reed, the board is on the line. We are here to take you home." Those words hit like bricks. The security guards understood first, holding the very papers that proved his immense wealth. Margaret understood the reality a second later. Recognizing Harold's face made her blood run cold, a sudden pale panic that even the bright wedding lights could not hide. Vanessa was the last to understand. She stood holding her tilted champagne glass with that smug smile still frozen on her lips, her mind completely failing to process the massive mistake she had just made. But Harold was not about to let her off that easily. He turned to face the entire crowd, ensuring her public disrespect met a public consequence. For anyone who is confused, this is Nathaniel Reed, founder and managing partner of Blackstone Crest Capital. Mr. Reed is set to sign a $1.4 billion rescue deal for Archer Dynamics on Monday. That crucial funding was their only hope of saving Archer Dynamics from falling into a massive debt default within 90 days. He looked directly at the stunned bride, his cold expression showing zero mercy. "I understand there was an incident here tonight. Our board expects a full report before Monday morning." Margaret Whitmore let out a weak gasp, her pride entirely shattered. The expensive crystal glass slipped from Vanessa's numb fingers and shattered on the rocks below. She did not even look at the mess. She stared at Nathaniel with the sheer terror of someone realizing her own smug arrogance had just destroyed her family's entire future. Suddenly, the groom came running back across the driveway. He obviously knew the truth. Word of their catastrophic mistake had reached him through a frantic phone call or a guard radioing the news up the chain. Before he had even made it out the door, he gasped for air, his formal bow tie hanging completely undone. His hand was already raised in a desperate attempt to beg for forgiveness. "Mr. Reed, please, I had absolutely no idea. We never met face to face. Please, I had no clue it was you. I would never have let this happen if I had known. Please, let me make this right." Nathaniel just stared at him, taking his sweet time. He studied the open collar, the sweaty temples, and the trembling hand. He looked down at his ruined suit jacket, then back at Graham. "You only care because you finally know who I am," Nathaniel said quietly. "That is the lesson you should sleep on tonight." He never raised his voice. He did not need to. His quiet words echoed across the gravel because all other noise had stopped. Harold Bennett stepped forward and opened the Caleb-led vehicle. Nathaniel climbed inside without even glancing at Vanessa. He completely ignored Margaret and Graham, never looking back. He stepped inside, the door shut. The sleek convoy reversed in unison, headlights washing over shocked faces before rolling past the grand gates of the St. Adrian estate. By the time the final SUV cleared the gates, 6 phones in the courtyard had already finished uploading their footage. Within 40 minutes, the first clip of Vanessa aggressively tearing that quiet guest's jacket had leaked to an account with 900,000 followers. Within 2 hours, A major financial news channel picked up the viral video, easily identifying Harold Bennett in the background, and ran a devastating headline that would shatter the arrogant family's future. By the next morning, 3 major investment partners on the Archer Dynamics deal sent urgent identical emails to Graham's office, demanding immediate calls to discuss backing out of the partnership. By noon, 2 partners walked away completely. By the end of the week, Nathaniel Reed formally canceled his $1.4 billion buyout offer with a single-page letter, forcing their primary bank to immediately freeze every single credit line on the company account. They had 90 days to survive, but the industry knew they wouldn't last 60. The massive lawsuit landed on a Tuesday, 11 days after the wedding. Nathaniel's high-powered lawyers didn't announce it. They did not need to. The legal complaint targeted 3 defendants, including Vanessa, the private security firm contracted by the venue, the elite estate itself, and the entire document spanned 46 pages. The charges included assault, defamation, and unlawful detention. The financial damages demanded were never going to settle quietly. Depositions began 6 weeks later in a glass conference room on the 38th floor of a midtown tower. Vanessa showed up wearing a dull gray suit her publicist chose. Her hair was tightly tied. She left her massive engagement ring at home on advice of that publicist, who claimed with fake wisdom that the waiting cameras would judge her less harshly without a giant diamond. She had been coached. For 2 weeks, a top lawyer prepped her for this exact crisis. But within an hour, all that preparation fell apart under the crushing weight of the video evidence the legal team laid out. 6 phones had captured her arrogant tantrum in perfect detail. 4 more cameras had captured the parking lot. Let's watch as these synchronized time-stamped clips played on a massive wall, exposing her pride for all to see. Vanessa watched her arrogant self laugh while tearing his lapel. She watched her smug self toast Nathaniel under the bright floodlights. She watched her arrogant mother standing right behind. She was smiling until Harold Bennett's name was spoken, instantly melting her mother's proud expression away in real time. The opposing counsel asked her to identify herself in that footage. She did, forced to acknowledge her own foolish pride. She confirmed, instructing security to detain Mr. Reed. They asked if she verified before issuing that arrogant order that Mr. Reed had a valid invitation. She sat in silence for a long time, and when she finally spoke, her proud voice was thinner than she had practiced. I assumed he did not. Her husband Graham was deposed the next day. He had aged terribly since the wedding, a tragic toll of pride that shocked even his closest friends. His empire collapsed far quicker than financial experts had ever predicted. 2 of his biggest construction projects in Pennsylvania ground to a halt when subcontractors refused his arrogant terms. The board stripped away his proud title on a Friday afternoon. And by Monday, a new chief executive took over his ruined office. He sat across the long table from Nathaniel's lead attorney, answering every question without trying to defend his actions. Asked if he had watched his wife arrogantly tear Mr. Reed's suit jacket, he answered yes. When he was asked if he heard her order security to detain Mr. Reed in the parking lot, he said yes. Questioned why he failed to stop her, he fell silent for a long moment. Then he confessed, offering the only honest words he had spoken in 2 months. Because I was more afraid of embarrassing my wife than I was of doing the right thing. That damning admission went straight into the trial transcript. We can also find it in a massive profile of their ruined pride, published in a major business magazine the following spring. The journalist who wrote the story would later call it the absolute cleanest confession of moral failure she had ever recorded from someone in his position. In late February, the judge finally delivered his ruling. Vanessa had to pay $7.2 million, with another $1.5 million split between the estate and the security firm. She was also forced to issue a humbling written public apology. Its wording required direct approval from Nathaniel's legal team before anyone could read it. That humbling statement ran across 3 national outlets on a Wednesday morning. It spanned 4 painful paragraphs. It opened by using Nathaniel's full name and title right away. It fully admitted that her elitist behavior was driven entirely by blind assumptions she had no right to make about a man she had never even spoken to. Their proud company did not survive the 90 days. The bank seized their primary credit line on day 58. A larger Houston competitor bought their remaining assets for roughly 11 cents on the dollar, a tragic price for unchecked arrogance. He kept the projects, then fired most of the head office staff in a single afternoon. 2 weeks later, the arrogant Whitmore name was stripped from the building. Graham wasn't there to watch his proud family letters come crashing down. Nathaniel skipped the press conferences, choosing respectful silence over media spectacles. The firm's only public statement during this entire dramatic fallout was a brief sentence confirming they had canceled the deal with the arrogant leaders of Archer Dynamics, citing irreconcilable concerns over the disrespectful conduct of their arrogant senior leadership. Harold Bennett drafted those sharp words. Nathaniel approved the statement without changing a single word. By March, he invested in a far more respectful partnership. A modest engineering firm in New Haven had spent a year looking for honest growth capital. The founder, a hard-working woman in her early 50s, built her business from a two-person shop to a 40-person team with no outside help. Yet, arrogant investors at 4 different funds rejected her over 10 months because they felt her modest, honest projections lacked greedy ambition. Nathaniel met her on a Wednesday, showing her the respect of listening for 90 minutes. Then he signed a deal for $240 million the next week. That respectful investment made the firm profitable within just 2 quarters. By the end of the year, their workforce had tripled. Nathaniel kept quiet, but others in the industry noticed his silence. Those who watched closely understood the profound message he was sending. He was silently proving that his massive capital would only back respectful, decent partners rather than arrogant pretenders. Vanessa packed up and left their grand, arrogant family estate that April. Surprisingly, Graham was the one who filed for divorce. He waited until her humiliating public apology finally hit the papers. Then he immediately filed the petition, citing deep and irreconcilable differences. By summer, the divorce was final, leaving Vanessa with just her city apartment. Graham walked away with nothing. He abandoned New York completely for a modest consulting job at a mid-sized firm in North Carolina where former colleagues spotted him at local industry events the following year. He had finally stopped wearing the wedding band he once wore so proudly. That viral footage of her wedding day cruelty kept circulating for months. Boston professors even used it as a warning case study in media law seminars. National magazines referenced the video in deep dives, dissecting how wealth and arrogant entitlement ruin people's lives. Eventually, people stopped actively sharing the humiliating wedding clip. Not because they forgot, but because it became a permanent symbol of toxic pride. A stark warning, a reminder of what happens when arrogant people assume their status exempts them from the basic rules of human decency, choosing to look down on those they should have respected. Nathaniel ignored the entire circus. He kept a lifelong, disciplined rule of never reading articles that mentioned his name. Instead, he quietly ran his firm with the same humble integrity he always had. He kept driving himself, choosing humility over the arrogance of power. He slipped into rooms without fanfare, just as he had entered that fateful St. Adrian ballroom, showing quiet respect to all. He let others judge his worth, letting their own arrogance or respect dictate how they would treat him. Late one October night, precisely a year after that disastrous, arrogant wedding display, standing by his 42nd floor office window, he watched the city slowly come to life, shimmering light by light across the river. That ruined, torn suit still hung in his closet. He instructed his housekeeper never to mend it and never to discard it. It sat silently between pristine, newer suits, its chest seams still torn where Vanessa's arrogant hands had aggressively ripped it open. It remained there for the very reason some people cherish old letters. Not to dwell on the sting of that humiliation, but to mark the exact moment he realized how foolish people can be, and truly understood the hollow nature of those in the ballroom. Their destructive arrogance hadn't begun when Vanessa ripped his lapel. It started much earlier, with the valet dismissing his modest car with a sneer, in the arrogant tone of the waiter who banished him to the kitchen, and in the wealthy woman who grabbed his sleeve, assuming he was just a driver. That ripped suit was just the loud version of a quiet, poisonous bias running through every High society room crushing anyone who lacks massive wealth, huge investment funds, or a convoy of armored black SUVs waiting outside. That was the lesson he wanted to remember. Not his own hurt, but how effortlessly and casually they chose to disrespect him. So effortless and so completely approved by every single bystander in that room, with absolutely nobody even bothering to lower their phone and defend him from her. When the scandal finally settled across the media, the courts and elite corporate boardrooms, it boiled down to one truth. Observers phrased it in different ways. A journalist framed it one way. A law school professor explained it another way. A Sunday magazine analyzed it a third way. But Nathaniel always preferred the simplest explanation of all. He never wrote this vital lesson down. He had only muttered it once to Harold Bennett in the dark of their SUV, as they finally drove away from those pretentious estate gates that night. Real class, he had murmured, is never about the clothes we wear, the cars we drive, or how we enter a room. It is found in how we treat the very people we have arrogantly decided do not matter. Beyond his glass window, the vast city lights continued to glow. Nathaniel quietly watched them a bit longer. Then he turned back to sign a massive contract, a golden opportunity born of the respect others had thrown away.